Using Zotero to promote evidence-informed teaching. My name is Jamie Herron. I work at the SUNY Center for Professional Development. And I just wanted to take care of a few housekeeping items before I hand the mic over to Dakin and Lisa here. If you could all please keep your mics muted when you're not speaking, and if you have a question, first post it in the chat, and if we need to clarify or we want to have any extended conversation about that, then we'll invite you to unmute yourself. We'll be recording this and posting this later to the website so everybody can see this again if they would like to. And there's closed captioning available. If you look down on your menu bar on Zoom, you can see the closed caption icon there. If you click on that, you can have subtitles appear for yourself. And with that being said, Dakin and Lisa have requested that all the questions be held until after Lisa's portion of the presentation is over, and Dakin will be helping to address questions in the chat. So thanks for joining us today.
Good. Well, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Today's session is called Using Zotero to Promote Evidence-Informed Teaching. My name is Dakin Burdick. I'm at the Institute for College Teaching in SUNY Cortland, and Lisa Shear is my partner over at the library. So starting out, what is Zotero? So it's a free open source citation management software. It was developed at the Center for History and New Media at George Mason. It was originally released in 2006, so it's an old tool, but they are continuing to release items for it. The most recent release was actually just a few weeks ago. It can store citations from web sources or library databases from OneSearch. It can generate bibliographies, and it supports more than 30 languages. Essentially, it's a tool for gathering citations on the research you're doing. So as you move through the library, as you're looking at articles and pieces, if you think something's worth saving, you can save it to this database. It allows you to find it later. And if you're like me, it's sometimes very hard to find data on your hard drive. Well, this gives you a way that's actual searchable, and you can share it publicly as well. So why did we use this? Initially, we were working with the online teaching fellows here at SUNY Cortland, who were operating from 2019 to 2020. We were providing them with rigorous peer-reviewed readings as they requested on various topics. And we built a bibliography for them, and we were very happy that that could permalink back to the library's holdings through OneSearch, which was a new thing we could do, which was fantastic. Basically means that if they click on it, it takes them straight into the library, straight to that holding. So it's very easy to access things. However, I love data, and the bibliography grew too large. And at that point, Lisa suggested switching to Zotero. So I started an account in March of this year. We had about a 6 or 7 page bibliography on online learning at that time. So I used anystyle.io, which is an app you can use to convert existing web bibliographies into BibTeX and then import it into Zotero. So that got us our start on the database. We then published to a public group called Bibliography of College Teaching that is accessible to everyone. It's an open source. And Lisa began working on the tagging of that public group, which she's going to talk about in a minute. The next month, we learned that Robin Sullivan over at the University of Buffalo had already been doing this since 2010. And she had her site is called the Teaching and Learning Resources site. So we got together with her in June and talked about how the two sites were organized, what was the thinking behind them. And that was very useful, it was very helpful. And over the summer, we refined our ideas and began expanding the bibliography even further. So this is what it looks like if you're in the Zotero database. This is the desktop application. There's also a web cloud version, and there's also an app you can use to pull things from OneSearch. There's a number of different tools. This is the desktop, and what you see essentially is it lists the title and the creator, the author in other words, the year of publication, the publisher, the library catalog it was drawn from, and the date added and date modified, which is extraordinarily important when you're manipulating this data, because it's often the case that you'll go through and 6 months later, you'll add another duplicate piece in that you don't recall looking at before, but it's good to know that it's in there so that now you can start working on eliminating those duplicates. Essentially, you go in, or what I can do in our library anyway, is I can go into OneSearch, I can look up an article. In this case, the bad news is that the digital access divide is here to stay. And then I right click on this if I think this is a good one. I select the Zotero connector, which is the app that's going to pull that data. Select Save to Zotero, and then I've got a number of options. I can save to Zotero using Primo 2018, or I could save with a number of other things. Primo 2018 is the one that works the best. It pulls the abstract, it pulls a lot of good data, and is usually pretty accurate with what it's pulling. Sometimes I'll get something that Zotero will only be willing to pull the web page. That means I'm going to have to go in and modify the data after I pull it, but it'll give me a start as what's coming up. Then we've got to go in and copy the permalink, because one thing Zotero does not do terribly well, at least on our system, is copy the permalink. It almost never does it. So we've got this thing where you click on permalink and then you copy that permalink into Zotero. So this would be the section of Zotero. I click it into the URL, and at that point we've got a full citation in the database, and it's connected up with the library database, so it's easy to get to. And from there, that's my public site. That's my private site on desktop, and I'm going to upload that to my cloud, and then from the cloud I'm going to export it down to our public database. So there's a process involved. How much does this cost? So it's actually not too much. We're just using 2 GB storage at this point, which is enough we've got over 2,000 entries. So $20 per year, that's fairly inexpensive. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, who's actually the real expert on this.
Thank you, Dakin. And I do want to note that a lot of you may see something very similar in your own libraries in terms of the system.
I didn't say anything.
Can we make sure that everyone
in terms of the system?
presenting?
And I want to make sure to note that it's using Primo, which is the overarching name for the library system. Ours is branded as OneSearch. So you might have a slightly different name that you might see if you try to use this and save from your own library. So I just want to make sure you know that. But speaking to the utility for librarians in particular, how we use Zotero and how this has really been useful for us, the idea that you are creating this shared searchable bibliography, and it's covering a really specialized topic. I think that this collaborative nature is the part that's especially important. You want to keep that in mind because Zotero is also free and has withstood the test of time. That is absolutely one of the reasons why I recommended it in the first place to Dakin, and why I would recommend this if you wanted to go ahead with your own project for this. It's very user friendly. There's not too much of a learning curve, especially if you're going in and just starting out with the basics. But this idea that we have this curated content was really important. So yes, you can sign up for updates within a database or to get an email when certain terms come up, but this is just an excellent tool for curating your content, for having that expert eye come in and put your content together. You can also use this for librarians anyway, in instruction. So in general, citation management. You also want to think about that yourselves as instructors. This idea that you can use it certainly with your students in classes as well for group work, individually, interactive activities. They can also use it beyond Cortland outside of their time as a student. So that's one of the other key points I want to just make sure as a takeaway is that this tool, Zotero, is freely accessible to anyone. So this is not just a SUNY-wide tool, right? It's not just a SUNY Cortland tool. It is something that anyone can use for citation management. And then finally, this idea of connecting. So Dakin and I were able to make this connection with this, using this tool with this project. But there are a lot of different ways that you can do research. So librarians and faculty can collaborate in order to create these bibliographies. So really focusing on specific research topics as new publications come up. And that's really what we are doing here with this is we are very focused on particular materials. And actually, if we can go on to the next slide, we can start talking a little bit about a little more detail about that process and how this all kind of connects together. So what we did and how we did it. I'm going to talk in a lot of detail about the tagging procedure. I'll get into some of the nitty gritty on how we specifically are built this collection. But as I alluded to, yes, you can start building a collection at any time, right? You can bring in your past research. You can put this all together. Dakin had a lot to draw from. He actually had a large collection pre-existing that he mentioned, having to actually transport it in. So absolutely, you can start with your personal collection of materials. And then of course you want to be thinking about, as you're building a collection like this, as you're searching and exploring, you want to ultimately grow and keep current. So how does new material fit in with the rest of the collection? It's a good question to ask yourself as you're starting to explore beyond maybe your starting point. So that's just something to keep in mind. So our first process was adding what we had, and then considering what we would add beyond that, what we needed next, where we were going next. Cleaning up the tags. So to make this a really valuable and searchable collection, you want to make sure that you have good tags, good information that will help you to be able to search and organize the content. That's really, I'm going to get back to that in a moment and really focus and zoom in on that. But you just want to keep in mind, from an information literacy perspective, you want these tags to really help you to discover information. So you're going to see material, you're going to see ideas that are going to pop up in these tags that you might not have elsewhere. You might not have it in the title or somewhere else in the description. So the key point here is that these tags will allow you to find similar content. They're going to keep similar materials together. It lets you look at items and the relations together in a different way than you otherwise might. So, you may come across something unexpected as you search and hunt underneath a particular tag. So just some things to keep in mind. So we cleaned up those tags and we got them so they're valuable and searchable. We added links where necessary. And as Dakin mentioned, yes, a lot of the time, it really depends on the database and where you're transporting things in from, right? Sometimes they don't add the links very well. Web content may not always add the links either. It really depends. So some links don't come along. You have to make sure to add those. In our early process, we actually had discussed and we tried using categories. That worked somewhat. Categories are a little more static than using tags. So what you would find is that while they somewhat serve their purpose, they did organize content. It wasn't a very useful way to organize it. Actually, it didn't really give you a lot of detail. There might be an item, for example, or there might be a record that you could absolutely put in more than one location. So you can imagine that could get kind of a little messy after a while.
Yeah, let me add that was my brilliant idea, and I spent a lot of time creating a whole bunch of subcategories, and then had to strip them all out because it was not the best way to organize.
We found it was becoming really unwieldy. So absolutely, this is one of those things, if you're thinking about the process, we started with this early process that we really changed. And very similar idea, I started out with thinking I was going to strictly use the Library of Congress subject headings. This is a system that is well known, researched, and standardized among libraries. So we use this to sort our collections, generally book materials. But you will also find, interestingly enough, that other databases will not necessarily use Library of Congress subject headings that strictly. Most databases tend to have their own system. So that can get a little intriguing because you end up, as material gets imported in, coming from all these different locations, you end up with these different tags and different systems. So ultimately, I decided not to stick that strictly with Library of Congress subject headings. I'm going to talk about this as I get more into tagging, but I loosened it up a little bit and started thinking more about what is the purpose of this collection and what would be the most useful and usable. So we go to the next slide. So the tagging process. Early on, I noticed that, as we were getting these records in and as Dakin was doing the bulk import of a lot of records all at once, there were some issues that had to be resolved. And, within Zotero, fortunately, a lot of this is very user-friendly and easy to address. But the first thing that I noticed that a lot of records would come in with no existing tags whatsoever. This was something that happened fairly often. So this would be a case where you would want to examine that record closely and look for those tags. So if you don't have the tags in the, in the Zotero record, you'd go back to the original and see what's already there. Sometimes there's something already existing. If not, that was where I would consider bringing in those Library of Congress subject heading tags. Especially, now you're going to find this is the case, especially for example, web content. They're not going to have nice, clean tags on there necessarily for you to draw from. So this would be a great time for you to go back to a source of good standardized language to help just organize this. But if once you start building a large enough collection, you're going to have pre-existing tags in there anyway that are, that are good tags. So I started basing a lot of what I was adding on what we already had existing in the collection. So once the tags were really cleaned up, that was really where you would do that. So that would take a little time because sometimes you would have to really examine the article and determine what subjects would work with this. All right. Next slide. And actually, I do see a question come through. Mesh tagging, absolutely. So for those thinking about the medical field, right? So yes, you could explore using your own tagging system, using a preferred tagging system, and Mesh would be one that I would recommend. All right. So tagging process. So if you have pre-existing tags, which a lot of records will come in with tags already applied. This is something where I really want you to consider, and even for the last one, but especially here, consider the audience and the purpose of the collection. That was what I did, and that's what I would say is also just a good question to ask yourself while building this sort of collection. So who's using it and why, right? So that's going to really help to determine what tags are going to be useful to keep and how you're going to want to edit these materials, right? So some tags did come through just fine, actually. So I will say that there were some records that I didn't have to do much. I may have had to actually make maybe an addition or so based on what was already in our collection. So that sometimes would happen. But the ones that we had to edit or delete are really what I want to kind of mention, because this would be what you would come across if transporting records into Zotero. So the first one is mash together word strings. Sometimes the tags would come in all in one, it would be all in one tag basically. So I'm going from simplest to the more complex, by the way. So you're starting out with something that was really a matter of editing. It really was just a matter of taking those out, separating those out and making sure they're their own separate tags. Considering the audience, I decided to just outright delete anything that was a foreign language that really didn't make sense. It would just be sort of cluttering up our set of tags, because this is an English speaking set of folks who we expect to be using this. It didn't make sense to keep those kind of terminologies around, so that was deleted. Finally, the ones that took a little more, I would say, some more thought and some more, consideration is the language being too vague or too broad. So you had to kind of consider, if you're looking for an item such as education. I mean, education is the example I have here. That is a really broad heading. Now that's useful if you're going through, say, the one search or, Primo, right? You're doing a search in a broad database containing materials on all different subject areas. Yes, that would be helpful there. It would not be so helpful here, where our faculty are more likely to be looking for an aspect of education. So you might be looking for history of education or science education, something along those lines. So I really wanted to make sure the language was not too broad or too vague, right? So that it would be something more useful to somebody who's coming in and, okay, I'm looking for my topic, right? It oftentimes disciplines usually works there. But on the other hand, too narrow language, right, was also something I found to be a little bit of an issue. So you want to get that spot in the middle. If it's too narrow, it's not going to be as usable or as interesting. So it's something like, say you're looking for the University of Bucharest. That's a little too specific. That's something that, again, would probably just kind of clutter up our list of tags. And you'll only find one item potentially, right, that has that tag. So something that's too narrow is not going to help here. It's not really going to make it, it's not going to be as findable. You're not going to find that much. So this would be something, if you were getting that narrow and that specific, you would most likely be searching elsewhere anyway. You would most likely be going out to other databases. So we want things that are kind of in a nice middle ground in terms of findability, the purpose, what people are coming in to discover in this collection. They want to learn about teaching. They want to learn about online learning, different aspects of teaching. So we really want to keep that in mind. And then finally, redundancy, that one's pretty straightforward. This one is a good one to do when especially when you're done with the majority of tags. Consider where merging can happen. Fortunately, Zotero does let you change tags as a group really easily. So if you have all these endings that are very similar, pluralized endings and so on, lectures, lecturing, you can merge them together. So you can go through and change lectures to just say lecture. So pretty straightforward. All right, next one. So this is really kind of how that went. So after that major cleanup, after going through and kind of trying to figure out which tags really could go, which ones were the most usable, they could be better managed at that point for quality, merged, renamed. So they could be looked at as a whole and then you can determine from there which, how it might look, what you might need to add, what you might need to take away. And it really started with that low order fixing and then moved on to the higher order consideration of, okay, what is really valuable? What language is the most valuable? How are people going to encounter this collection? And what are they going to need to be able to find more articles that are similar? So that is a little bit about the process. If you want to go to the next slide, Dakin. So the best practices that we determined based on all of this, we determined that it is better if you're going to manage a collection like this to use tags rather than sub-collections. So as I've been mentioning and talking about, you want to have language that is helps them to be findable, that you can find similar items that are tagged with similar ideas, and it makes it much more fluid and flexible in terms of organization. Removing duplicates. We're going to talk about this in the challenges a little bit. You can absolutely, there's a way to remove duplicates in the desktop app. It can do it pretty readily, but we'll talk about an issue we came across. But yes, you can do that, and I would recommend doing that as often as possible because it's very easy if you are dealing with a large collection to get duplicates. And then rather than merge, as you're looking at these duplicates, and Dakin, I think this was yours, but looking at each one and optimizing them, right?
Yeah, and let me mention that in that there's a couple reasons to do that. It finds duplicates very easily. However, when you merge duplicates, the system sometimes will smash all the tags together. So if I've pulled in some of Lisa's cleaned up tags, I can mash them up with all the crud that she cleaned out, and now I've got a huge hairy mess. That's one problem. The other piece is if I download something now and I download another one 6 months later, I may find out that those two versions are different. They may have different size of abstracts in them. They may have different details. And again, if I merge them, I may lose that data. So it's better to kind of look in each of those and then optimize the combination. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. And then also while you are going through and you're doing all this cleanup and you're trying to determine language and you're going through, you want to make sure that you sort by date, and that will help you to determine what entries are newer as you're going through. I learned that early on in the process because otherwise it is very easy to lose track of where you're going, especially again, when you're looking and dealing with a large amount of entries. So if you're trying to bring in your whole collection, your backlog collection, all right. So challenges. One of the major challenges we discovered pretty early on, there is a lack of any good analytics apps out there for Zotero. I believe Dakin and I we both looked into it. I think we both came across the same strings of conversations out there. There used to be something, it has been discontinued since. So unfortunately, because there's not any great way to analyze each record that's being used, you can't really do that. You could absolutely have a link to your Zotero collection, and then you can track that link and see how often people access your collection. However, you can't look at, it lacks the finesse of seeing what exact records they're clicking on. What are they actually reading? What are they actually looking at, right?
Yeah,
there's no good way to do that at this point.
And from my side, it's hard to rationalize this use of Zotero because I have no way of knowing how many people are using it. So I can think that it's being used well, and I can look at some of the web traffic, but that really doesn't give me a very accurate picture. So I'm doing this all on faith, hoping that people actually are using the tool.
Right. Yes. So that's one that is absolutely a challenge. The volume of material, especially if you have a lot to deal with at first, it can seem a little overwhelming. So trying to go in and figure out, you really have to kind of determine, and that's why that best practice is, that's why I was recommending that in terms of start with the cleanup, start with the, the part that goes a little more, it's a little easier, it's a little more straightforward, and then start going in and really digging into, okay, what content do I have and how can I best sort this? And how can I best, as you're bringing in new material, consider how it fits in relation to what you already have. So that's just something just to keep in mind. If you have a lot to work with, you may want to kind of start small, start with what is maybe easier to approach before then going into kind of a much larger scale organization and looking at that collection kind of as more of a whole. The desktop, now there's the desktop version and the browser version. They both do have somewhat different functionality. Even the way that some of the tagging looks, some of the categories, there are some things that do work a little differently within each. I believe I started out I was using both of them when dealing with this collection anyway. I was using both of them at first. I started using the desktop version more often. I think, Dakin, you had a similar experience. Yep. So we both determined that for the management of this collection and for what we were trying to do, the desktop version was actually working. That worked a little better for us. So that's something to keep in mind. As you're managing a collection like this, you want to think about adding, if you're going to add contributors, who are you adding? What is their role going to be? Because we started out thinking, we've started this out. This was just us at first within SUNY Cortland. And then we started considering how we would expand this and what would that look like. So that's something else to keep in mind if you're managing a collection like this. And what kind of access will people outside your institution have to some of these materials? Because sometimes you may not be able to provide them directly with the materials, but that is the purpose of having the citation there, so they can look that up and find it at their own institutions.
So if you're within SUNY, you should be able to look at the citation. You should be able to look at the citation in our library search function, but you probably won't be able to download the actual document because our subscriptions are different. The other issue is we have several members, but we really haven't given them access to this because we do so much editing. We've just kept it to Lisa and myself. However, other people have Zotero databases, and what you can do in Zotero is pull from one person's database into yours. So what I'll do is I'll create a separate folder. I'll pull the data in that I want to look at, and then I'll edit it there and then upload it to our public site. So there's a chance to do a lot of exchange. And like I said, Robin Sullivan's been doing this 10 years. So there was a number of pieces from her collection that I could pull into ours.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then the other challenge we came across, and Dakin, this was your challenge, but trying to pull material, pulling material from the public database to the private one, you were finding issues with the
yeah, that's tricky.
Yes.
Yeah. Now we're kind of getting close on time. So if you have questions about any of this, just email us. You can email me at teaching@cortland.edu and I'll answer any questions, or I'll toss them at Lisa and she can answer.
Yeah, and if there are any questions, because the last couple slides, I think we can move on if we want, and material can be removed. I mean, that's also.
Yeah. So the next ones are just where we're at. If you're interested in comparing Zotero to its competitors, there is a comparison of reference management software that's linked into this piece. We've made a couple references here for Zotero, and you can read about those. And also, if you're just using this today, we've made a list of the important links as tiny URLs. So if you want to find things, this is the URLs that will get you there. With that, we should ask if anyone has any questions.
I don't know if there was anything from previous in the chat that we could answer. That was.
I think we answered everything in chat, but wow, we must have done a great job. That's awesome.
Hi, this is Robin.
Hey, Robin.
Hi, thanks for mentioning the library that I have, and I'll share a link in the chat. I'm happy to let anybody join that library. It's not as organized at all as the one that they're doing in Cortland. And you're welcome to add and organize. But a question that I had for the two of you is I've tended to gravitate towards the use of collections and tags. And I'm wondering, you were saying that collections is not preferred by you, and I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that and why.
Sure. I created a ton of collections thinking that was going to be a great way to go. But basically what it did is just add to our management issues. I might still use collections for specific uses. So if I'm giving a workshop and I have a specific set of materials that I want to share with people, I might create a collection temporarily and give that to them. But frankly, most of the time I can create a collection, I can give them those materials in a bibliography I generate just by searching by tags, identifying the specific items, and then sharing that out. And that works just as well, and it doesn't clutter the system.
Yes, yes, because we were finding that sorting by category, we were starting to get into subcategories, and those were getting a little too, I was talking about that specificity of language and getting a little too specific and a little too narrow. We were ending up with categories where maybe there were 2 items, maybe, you know, it was really kind of starting to get, I think some of those were getting a little too cluttered or too narrow. So not as helpful really for searching, whereas with tags, it's more of a point of need search as well, right? So you can say, oh, I really want to see if we have anything about this, and just plug that in. So that's another advantage.
Did that help?
Yes, thanks. And have you used Zotfile at all, or Papership?
No. You want to talk about those briefly?
So Zotfile I've used quite a bit, and the 2 things that it does. One thing is I try to attach a PDF to every record, and if it's not something that's publicly available, I'll put a password on the PDF in Acrobat, just so that my public-facing web page can be shared, and I'm not violating copyright. But what Zotfile has done is, if that PDF comes over without a title, or even if it does come with a title, it will be able to rename that record with the name of the author and then the name of the article, and I think the date is in there too. So that's been very useful. And then there's another really good feature that if I'm working with a team of other faculty and staff on a paper, we can have a folder for that paper that we're working on, and we can all open up those shared PDFs. So it's living up on the Zotero server. And then whatever we highlight can be extracted into the notes field. And then that's kind of a nice way to bring out to the other writers or whoever's interested the pieces that are relevant. And Papership, I haven't used that a lot, but what it is nice for is to get kind of copies of some of the PDFs onto a tablet, so that when I go on trips, sometimes I'll have reading material with me if I don't have Wi-Fi.
Thank you.
Great tools. And
Any other-
as I said, I'll share the link to the library I have. Anybody is welcome to just peruse the library. It's publicly open. Or if you want to add and help organize it, you're welcome
Yep.
to request.
And I've actually got the link to the library here. It's the
Great.
teaching and learning resources.
Wonderful. Thank
Perfect.
you.
And that actually ties into a question that was in the chat. If you have to be invited to view a Zotero collection, if it's publicly viewable, all you need is the link to the collection. Otherwise, I mean, you can make collections private if you prefer. So you can have something, say, shared between you and maybe your group mates, or maybe whoever you're working with, somebody, your colleagues, anybody. So you're aware of that.
Now, so ours is an open database. Robin, I think yours is closed, right? So they have to write you and then get added?
To become a contributing member, they have to request membership. But
Got
to
it.
view it, they
But
can
it's
just click
viewable.
on the link and view the different folders.
Great,
Good.
thank you.
And if the PDF is behind password protection, then they have to find that article somewhere else.
All right, well, thank you. And thanks to everyone for coming. I hope this was useful to you.
Some ideas about using Zotero and collaborating, importantly. Yep.
Thank you to Dakin and Lisa for that presentation. I know I've been using Zotero kind of very weakly compared to what you guys are doing, and I've learned a lot today. Thank you for that. I think our next session begins at